So I get a lot of requests for different things to take apart on the channel and check out. And believe it or not, one that keeps coming up is Ring Fit. And I'm not really sure why. I don't know if it's just because it's an interesting device that actually works pretty well and people seem to really enjoy it. It's fairly popular in different places. I know it's very popular in Japan. And a lot of that has to do with how well it actually works for people who want to work out at home. And while I don't really work out at home much, I usually go to the gym to do all of that. I was at least interested in checking it out with how much people were asking, not really using it, more or less taking it apart and seeing what's going on inside this ring. I have an idea as to how it's doing it, and if that's the case, it's going to be really funny because there is a device from Nintendo's past that may have a little element in this device, which people who already have the Ring Fit might get a kick out of, but I figure we'll take it apart and we'll check it out here on the channel. So let's head on over to the table to take this guy apart right after we talk about today's sponsor. And a big thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring today's video. So you may have seen all of the videos I do where I review different electronics or update you on my GameCube collection. Well, it turns out I do a lot of online shopping because of this, and filling out the same old form at checkout gets really old really fast. Dashlane lets you skip all of the typing by saving your basic information as well as any payment options you normally use. It's worked really well when filling out all of my usual information and even saves all of my passwords so I don't have to remember them. And since Dashlane is storing your data for quick checkout, they've made sure all of your information is safe using decentralized storing for each user's information and a master password that is not stored by them. Only you, only on your own registered device, can decrypt your data. Dashlane also has a VPN service for premium users, so you can surf the web anonymously and safely. You can even use the VPN service to access geo-locked content for applications like Netflix. Check the link in the description below to try Dashlane for 30 days free, no credit card required. Once again, thanks to Dashlane for sponsoring the video. We all know by now Nintendo likes to try weird off-the-wall ideas at times. Things like Labo, for example, are impossible to predict, and Ring Fit is just the same. Coming up with a fitness-based adventure RPG is certainly not something I was expecting, especially with a new device called the Ringcon. But Nintendo so far has seen success with this new game, even having to apologize to customers in Japan for the shortage of stock, and the game being constantly in the top 10 sold each week as reported by Famitsu. I like the idea of getting people moving and exercising in different ways to make the act of working out more interesting and enjoyable. Tying this stuff into video games isn't necessarily new, but when we saw the first trailer for Ring Fit, it was pretty obvious this was something completely unique. Unboxing Ring Fit is really straightforward. At the top is the case for the Ring Fit game, and since all of the information for the game is on the back of the main box, the case has this nice wraparound cover art with one picture spanning the entire box. Underneath the game is the Ringcon itself along with a leg strap. I figure the leg strap doesn't really need much explanation as it relies completely on the Joy-Con attached to it. The Ringcon, however, is something people have been talking about with how it works and detects your movements and squeezes. In the game, the Ringcon takes center stage, having you move side to side, up and down, and squeezing and pulling to complete exercises in the game. Overall, the actions happen relatively lag-free, and the ring requires just a single Joy-Con to do everything. The ring itself feels really strong and is built to stand up to some serious punishment. A Pilates ring isn't a new concept, and they are generally made out of like fiberglass, allowing it to be flexible and fairly strong. This one, however, is a bit more advanced, sending signals to the Switch to act out movements on screen. Now, the movement part is pretty straightforward, with the Joy-Con that's attached accounting for that part, but the idea of squeezing and pulling apart being detected would be a bit harder for the Joy-Con to do on its own. So to start, I figure we'll take it apart to see how it's doing this. At the top, right where the Joy-Con attaches, are several screws, with the most obvious one being around that railing where the Joy-Con attaches. I removed these and realized pretty quickly that a ribbon cable was leading from the railing and disappearing inside, so another 4 screws had to be removed to get the casing off of the Ringcon. This gives us our first real look at a board on top along with a sensor. A quick look around this board and that sensor after removing a few screws inside is really all there is to this ring, and now we can look at how it works. So I actually got really close to just cutting like the Ring Fit part like completely apart just to see if there's anything really going on inside of it. And as I really started to look through that metal, that steel part that was machined shut there with no real screws to open it, I started to realize something about it, and that is that all the way around that ring, I've had some people ask me if that is in any way able to detect things on its own, as in, does it have any kind of sensors running all the way around the ring inside of it? No, it actually doesn't. It doesn't have anything through it. What you're seeing with that ring is a typical, mostly typical Pilates ring. I think it's a bit stronger though. It is pretty much just fiberglass with like a rubber coating around it, like basically a rubber tube around it to kind of give it that more grippy feeling to it. It's just straight up fiberglass. It's a bit stronger, I think, than your typical Pilates ring. So when I started looking through it, I realized something. All right, so let's actually go over here to this image here, and you can actually see a pretty good shot of just the overall board itself, right? Like it's pretty easy to see everything here. We have 3 different wires going from the board to this piece of metal, which is the big machined piece of metal here. And that was something that was kind of difficult to really figure out what I was going to do with it, because like I said, I almost thought about just cutting it in half, getting a Dremel out. We're just going to cut this thing in half. Yes, it'll ruin the Ring Fit technically, but it'd be interesting to see what was going on in there until I started to figure out how they were going about doing this. So we know, of course, this little ribbon cable here, that's just for the Joy-Con rail, which this thing relies on the Joy-Con a lot. Shocker, right? Yeah. The Joy-Con does 95% of the heavy lifting when it comes to everything you do in Ring Fit Adventure, which continues to show, by the way, just how complex these Joy-Con controllers really are. Now, of course, when you turn the Joy-Con around, when you put it above your head, all of that is done through gyros, right? That's sure, motions detecting, all of that. That's something I think most people understand. But when it comes to the actual part where you have to squeeze or pull apart the ring, I think that's the part that's really throwing some people off when it comes to this. But if we look here, we have a single chip right there, and that chip appears to be pretty much in charge of detecting how much the ring is being flexed. And that is pretty much all it really needs to do, because the Joy-Con does everything else, but the Joy-Con needs help figuring out how much you're bending this ring or pulling it apart. It has to measure tension or flex, and that's what this thing has to do here. See this white glob? Well, I decided to actually scrape that glue off just to see what was under it. And once I started doing that, it became pretty obvious that this is some sort of flex sensor. Now, flex sensors aren't really anything new, but this would be, I guess, a new way to use it. Put it on a Pilates ring, and all of a sudden, your game system, consider that, I mean, it's your game system, along with the Joy-Con, can pretty much put all of the puzzle pieces together to figure out what you're doing when you're handling that Ringcon, right? The Ringcon. So when you're pushing together, it can figure out that, okay, there's this much tension on it, because those two parts inside are not connected. So the Ringcon itself is just one piece, but it's not actually connected at the top. There is a gap between it, and if I were to cut it in half, it would just spring into one long piece. Now, the reason for that is they're trying to get flex out of it. They're trying to figure out. So if you push it together, you will get, of course, kind of this downward flex on it, whereas if you pull it apart, it will start to have an upward flex, and it's measuring that and how much it's flexing by using this flex sensor. Now, what's really funny about this situation is we're talking about technically a Ringcon, a circle. This is kind of coming full circle, because if you check into Nintendo's history with flex sensors, the last time that they were really used in a product that was pushed out there was with the Power Glove. So in a way, the Ringcon and the Power Glove are connected through the technology that they use to achieve their goal. Now, I think the Ringcon has a big advantage by having a Joy-Con attached to it, which again is very complex. But to consider we're going all the way back to the NES, and we're getting an idea from it and moving it over to a Pilates ring that then gets turned into a Ringcon, really shows you that Nintendo, they do look back at some of the previous ideas and how they can repurpose them. It's actually very impressive to see that, but it also shows you all the wild and crazy ideas Nintendo can come up with. I mean, really, there's not a lot to the Ringcon. It doesn't have any type of battery inside. It's fairly hollow. It just needs a very standard and easy to use board here for the Ringcon to understand one thing, and that's how much it flexes with a flex sensor. It's pretty cool to see that, and again, Nintendo coming up with some crazy ideas to make it all work out. But let me know what you guys think about the Ringcon Ring Fit Adventure, if you've been playing it, and if it has been helping you out, I guess, with like a workout regimen. I'm curious to hear some of the stories about how that's working. And what do you think about the Ring Fit, the Ringcon for the Ring Fit Adventure, I should say, being somewhat connected with the technology that's using to the Power Glove? Interesting stuff, right? Thanks, guys, for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I'll see you next time.